welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm really excited for today's podcast because we are joined by Katie McMinn, who is a tarot reader, and we are talking all about tarot. And I have been very interested in tarot for a while now, but it took me a long time to actually pick up any cards and start reading for myself, which I get into that story a bit more in the podcast. But I found myself listening to podcasts about tarot and taking in information about tarot without actually doing it. And I just felt my time wasn't here yet. But the last few months, I had started getting this knowing that I really wanted to do tarot, but I wasn't sure where to find the right cards. And there's this story that goes around saying that you have to be gifted your first pack of tarot cards in order to start pulling cards. And I let that stop me for a long time, but I don't believe in those kinds of rules. And also, I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and she was telling me about this woman that she knows who owns a business and is a tarot reader and made a tarot deck called Way Home. And in the tarot deck, she talks about how she lived in New York, and then she moved to California, and then she moved to North Carolina, and then she moved back to New York, and just finding her way home through these tarot cards. And that story really hit for me, especially for what I'm going through right now. And I knew immediately that is my deck. I went home, I bought it that day, and I have been pulling cards for myself every day since. It's been about 2 months, and it's been a really special ritual for me. So I have been wanting to find a good tarot card reader to come on the podcast to talk about how this can be another tool to guide you back to yourself, to strengthen your connection to your intuition, and to connect you to spirit guides and the universe and the energy around you and your spirituality in general. And so that's exactly the kind of conversation that Katie and I have today. Katie has been reading cards for 5 years now, and she believes that we can find guidance from our allies, our spirit guides, God, the universe, whatever the energy is, and she knows that energy can guide us to live a more fulfilled life. And I believe the same. We go into all of these topics and much more, and I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this one. And as you're listening, I really want you to think about what this sparks in you. If it sparks you to take action on something, to think about a certain area of your life, to have a conversation, to meditate, whatever is sparked in you, whatever thought process or initiation it has within you, I want you to honor that and lean into that and trust that. And if you want to share with me what comes up for you, I'd love to hear. It definitely sparked something in me, so I think that it will do the same for you. Katie, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here as well.
What is something you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. So funny enough, not a lot of people know that I read tarot, actually.
Okay.
It's funny that that's the theme of this podcast episode. I feel like really only there's 2 groups of people in my life. My inner circle know that I do, and then any of my clients that I read for. But like generally, most people don't know that I read tarot.
Interesting. Is that because it's something new in your life or something that it doesn't come up, or why do you think that is?
I think there's several different things behind it. So when I first started reading, I didn't really want to publicize that I was, because I wasn't sure how my colleagues and acquaintances would respond to it, right? And I think there was a bit of fear coming from my end of judgment. And I just didn't want to feel any of those things in conjunction with tarot because I loved it so much and it's been such a helpful tool for me in my life. But then it's interesting because I went public with it probably like 3 years ago. So I went back and because you had asked me on our initial call how long I had been reading, and I realized I got my first deck 5 years ago. So had been reading for 5 years. So I'm thinking somewhere around year three, I really wanted to get clients because I had been reading for 2 years and it was enjoyable. I just enjoyed it so much. And I remember I first published a page on my website, and the whole day I had this really weird kind of pit in my stomach where I was like, why is this not feeling good for me? Like,
Mm.
I really want to share this with the world. It feels really good when I'm reading for clients and just doing a reading in general. The energy is always really positive. And so it was interesting. I got on a phone call with one of my girlfriends, and she was like, do you think it has anything to do with like a level of sacredness that comes? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it almost felt like if I was publicizing it or selling it in a way, through a website, it made me feel like it just wasn't something that was sacred. And so it's interesting. So I took it off of like the navigation part. Anyways, long story short, I kind of adjusted some things. And now I feel like having it be more word of mouth and being able to kind of share it that way, it just feels really good because I think it's getting to the people who need it and the
Mm.
people that I can serve with it, and not the mass public who are going to taint it, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I resonate with parts of that. And I want to ask you one more question before we're gonna pull a card for everyone, but how did you first find tarot?
It was my late mother-in-law. So
Mm.
she was all into reading all the time. And she, in my late 20s, or excuse me, my early 20s, started reading for me. And it was just so fun and exciting. And I remember anytime she wanted to read for me, I was like, yes, let's do this. And it was so magical every time she would lay the spread out. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm getting so much insight. And I feel like I'm getting so much information that is helping me choose different things and help guiding me down different paths. And so for me, it was a really, what's the word? It's not intimate, but just a really familial type
Mm.
of experience, just because it did come from her. And she was just so full of love when she did it that for me, I kind of, that's the experience that I want to give to people when I read for them as well. And so it was just a really good introductory to it for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And how did she learn about it? Was it something that she taught herself or was she more professional with it?
No, she never really read on a professional level. It was just more for her friends and family.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how she got into it actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is true for a lot of different modalities in the spiritual space, but they can find us in really kismet and meaningful ways and at the right time. Um, I have Tarot's been on my radar for a really long time. I've always been interested in it, but I had never really gotten into it. And it's interesting actually, because I've been listening to podcasts about tarot for years without actually doing it. I don't even know why. And I kept knowing I want to do tarot, but I feel like it's not the time yet. It's not the right time yet. And then all of a sudden this deck kind of landed in my lap, and that's a whole story. But now I've been doing it every morning for almost 2 months and it's been really powerful for me. But with that being said, I'm still very much a beginner and still learning all about it. Do you have a system that you turn to when you're reading cards for yourself versus when you're reading for others?
Oh, that's a really good question. So a system, I feel like it's funny. So the Virgo in me, I'm very system oriented. I like things structured. It's very, I like the plan. When
Mm-hmm.
it comes to reading though, I rely heavily on just intuition and what my body is telling me. So I actually don't read really any differently, whether it's for me or for someone else. I just try to open up that channel so that I can hear the messages that need to be delivered, whether it's for me or for a client.
And for in your human design, you have all your arrows facing to the right, which is less about structure and more about just being very flowy and not really strategic. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. So with that being said, we each have a deck. I
Mhm.
would love for us to pull a card. And while you're doing that, I would love to for you to tell me like how you're shuffling the cards, what you're doing. The Virgo in me, uh, and the researcher in me really wants to understand like how you do it. Are you okay? Are you
Okay.
comfortable with that?
Yeah, that's totally fine. I just have to clarify before we start. So you're a Virgo sun, correct?
Yes, and moon. Yeah.
You're a Virgo sun and moon?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm a Virgo moon. That is so funny. Okay, so I
Okay,
just had to
okay.
try that for listeners. That's so funny with the structure. And you said all of like the flow within my human design chart. I'm actually a Pisces sun. So that's kind
Mm,
of where the flow comes from for sure.
that makes, and what's your rising sign?
Rising Scorpio.
Oh, me too.
Really?
Yeah,
That is too funny.
I love that. That's so funny.
That's funny.
Um,
Well, then we were talking before how you were born on a new moon and I was born on a full moon.
yes, yes.
It's so
So,
wild. I love it. Okay, so typically anytime I pick up a deck, I just try to like clear my mind before of just life thoughts, right? I just don't want that like trickling in. So I always just kind of start, I don't know how to describe this. I just kind of pull from the back and then just let them kind of fall in the front. If I haven't used the cards in a while, I'll either do like traditional shuffling with them and I'll wait to kind of hear for a number. I usually get like 3 or 5 are kind of my go-to numbers that I get often.
mhm.
But if I'm using them frequently, then I just kind of shuffle them this way from the back to the front. And then I have different ways of doing it. So sometimes I'll wait until one falls out if I'm really patient and just kind of feel like I want that, because sometimes it takes a minute for cards to fly out. Other times, if I'm feeling like there's one kind of sticking out of the deck and it's not going back in, I'll kind of ask myself, like, is that our card? And then sometimes it isn't, I'll just pull it out and read it.
Mhm,
So it just kind
mhm,
of depends. It's always different. I think, we as humans, we change on a daily basis. Our mental state changes on a daily basis. Our intuitive and energetic state changes on a daily basis. And so I think being in tune with that when you're utilizing cards is important too, because there's no wrong or right way. I think for me anyways, my experience has been just relying on my intuition. Oh, see, and there one fell out.
okay.
Okay. I think we should do, because mine's an oracle deck, because I thought
Okay.
it'd be something different than tarot, but you have tarot. So why don't you tell me what your tarot is?
Okay. So I pulled the moon and it
Hmm.
has the picture is a wolf howling at the moon.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's a sweet deck.
Yeah.
Okay, so I pulled, I'm already getting the message here. Okay, so I have the Shaman Dream Oracle deck. And
Okay.
so the one that I pulled is Heart Home Compassion. So it looks like a home embedded in a heart and it's all pink and golden colors. Oh, there we go.
Ooh,
So you
wow, I
can,
like that. And there's butterflies. Is that a butterfly?
yes,
I think
butterfly there.
so.
And then I think that's another one, butterfly there too.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Butterflies
love
are
it.
my sign.
Oh, I love that. What does it mean? Well, okay, maybe that will come up. So right away for the listeners with the moon is all about seeing through the darkness, right? Being able to see past all of the BS in a sense. The moon illuminates the truth. And I think that the listeners are being asked to really kind of hone in on their intuition and trust that their intuition is guiding them down the right path. I also think, in conjunction with this card, the hard home, that if they're able to trust their intuition, their heart is going to feel at home within that energy. And they're going to be receiving the right types of messages that they need in order to move forward in any given area within their life with this energy of feeling this security that you do when you found a home. right? The love that you experience from a home. I think the listeners are invited to really find a home within themselves and within their intuitive abilities.
I love that. I mean, and that's very related to what this podcast is about and what I teach people and really advocate for is letting our intuition be our guide and be our navigation system. I so when you pull tarot, do you have a specific question or topic in mind beforehand, or do you kind of see what the messages are come out as afterwards?
So I've done both.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes for myself, I just want the messages, unless there's something that has been bothering me or something that I feel blocked by that I need more information about, then I'll ask specifically for that. And I really focus in on that question as I'm shuffling. And I ask, for divine guidance and for the messages to come clear and really just focus in on that energy. If it's a more general reading, um, I just kind of I'll do a different spread. So there's tons of different spreads, and there's so many readers out there that are creating their own spreads. Again, I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think it's you try it and you see what works for you. You see what spreads are giving you the best information for that client or for that, moment in time that you're reading. Um, I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you're connecting to that divine energy so that you can get the message clearly.
Yeah, I do think so much of it is in intuition and trusting what comes out. I can be very perfectionistic and rigid with how I go about things. And when it comes to tarot, I've been really pushing myself to just not need to know all the ways that everyone is doing it and be perfectionistic about it and just trust that the messages that come are the ones I need to hear and really go with the flow of it. And
Mhm.
that has been, I mean, that's been a powerful lesson for me in general, in and of itself, and it's been really helpful.
I think that's really good advice for people who are just starting out with tarot, whether it's tarot or oracle. I mean, I guess oracle is more based on tuition. There are sometimes I never even read the books. I just
Mm,
start playing with the cards and I feel like that's more useful for me because then I'm seeing the cards and I'm getting those messages and I'm getting the messages the way that I'm meant to with each card. Now with tarot, it's interesting because we're all going to read tarot a little differently, right? We're all going to bring our own little kind of spin to it, to every reading, because we're all different and we all interpret it, the information differently. I do think as you progress with tarot and you use it, more long term, you most likely are going to have a point where you feel like you're plateauing. And that's where I think it's a good idea to start reading books, watching YouTube videos, and familiarizing yourself with the history and meaning of each of the cards, but still keeping in mind there are going to be certain cards that bring up different things for you that might not be brought up with a different reader. And so it is good because there's a lot of symbology in the tarot too that can really be helpful in you getting the messages, especially across to clientele as well. So it will be interesting to see your journey when that point comes. But I also say don't it's not like you're going to a university and getting a degree in it. It's not like you're
mhm.
getting tested on it. It should be something that comes very natural to you that you feel drawn to do. If it starts to feel like work, I say shut that down
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I believe tarot should always be positive and be helping you on this journey. It shouldn't be something that you feel like is a task or something that you're, needing to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I definitely have been reading and learning while I've been doing it. I love learning about the history and the traditions and the magic of it all. That's part of what makes it so special for me. Um, and that something I've realized is that different people translate things in different ways. So sometimes the way one person describes a card is totally different than how someone else describes a card. And so then I really try to use my intuition there to be discerning about what it means for me. But it can sometimes be challenging to pull for myself because my own stuff can get in the way. So do you find that comes up for
Definitely.
you? How do you work around that for yourself?
If I feel like I can't get a clear message, I just put the cards away.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes it is. And I found, I have a group of friends that will get together and pull some cards. And I've noticed that if I pull stuff for me, even though they're not traditional like readers, the insight that they bring is so incredibly helpful. And so I think sometimes it is, to your point, it's really difficult not to bring in your own biases and your own belief systems when it's you. You know, if you're reading for a client, especially someone like a client's different than a friend for me because I have a history and have a relationship with a friend, but a client, someone that you don't know, those are the easiest to read because you have no information
Yeah.
prior to the reading. So I feel like those messages come in a lot clearer. And so if you think of it in that term where you have like a client you don't know, and then you have a friend where you do have some bias, right? Because you have an established relationship with that person. So reading for them could be a little more difficult than a client. But then take it a step further with you, like you know your innermost thoughts, yourself to the deepest level. And so being able to read that, it can get confusing for sure.
And then sometimes I'll pick a card and I'll be like, no, but I don't want this to be the message. Be like, no, give me something else. But I try, I try to trust that. But how do you work around the quote unquote negative cards? Do you feel that there are negative messages when it comes to tarot?
So I don't think the messages themselves are negative. I think it's how the person takes it. So the
Mm-hmm.
tower card is a perfect example, right? People freak out when they see the tower because it's literally a building that is crashing down and there are lightning bolts and there are people falling off this tower. But when I see the tower card, of course, I see all of that and I can feel into that. But the beautiful thing is that that person is going through such a significant amount of change that there is some aspect in their life or in their being that is crumbling down to the foundation, and the foundation of the tower needs to be rebuilt. And when you go through that process, that is such a beautiful growth process for an individual that I just don't see it being a negative thing because I do believe we're down here to grow and to have this human experience. And so we need to have these quote unquote tower moments in order to progress to our greatest potential, essentially.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And, what might be a quote unquote negative or challenging card for one person might not be for another person. For example, the death card, I don't find that as scary as some other people might, not in regards to literal death, but death in my life, because I guess maybe being a Scorpio rising, I love the shedding and the transformation. And so I think it's really all about perspective and knowing that we can't get to the next level of the card. The cards are laid out in a certain order. So after the tarot, there tower card, there's I'm not sure the next card, but there's another phase of
Maybe like
life.
the Wheel of Fortune.
Exactly. You can't get to the next phase, the next of life without the tower.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting too, because you can get some inexperienced readers who maybe aren't as connected to the divine, and they would get a completely scary message. I also think, when you have a reader too who brings in that negative energy, I think that is a different way of reading as well. That's why when I do it, I bring as much positive energy as I can because I figure even these quote unquote negative cards, they're there for a reason. They have a purpose. And if you can find the lesson in it, then you're finding the beauty in it and the beauty in this whole human experience.
Exactly. And I really think that this is true with any type of spiritual work you're doing. You want to make sure that the practitioner you're working with has an energy that you feel drawn to and that feels supportive and positive, because there can be harm done if they come with the wrong intentions, which unfortunately there are people out there who have that. One thing I want to go back to quickly, the difference between tarot versus oracle cards for people who might not know.
So the main difference with tarot is that there is an archetype, there's structure to these cards. So when they're placed in certain areas side by side with certain other cards, there's different meanings. They kind of interact with each other in a sense. So, for example, I did a reading last month where two knights were looking inward to each other, and it very much so felt like there was some sort of tension or energy that was between these two types of people, right? But there could be a time where there's maybe like a queen card and a king that are back to back, and there's no connection to those whatsoever.
Mm.
And so with the tarot, it is important for you to be able to understand how you can read from card to card and not just isolate the cards. And with Oracle, there's just not that structure in place. I still think you can read with a flow in Oracle for sure, but it's just not as structured as tarot is.
How many cards do you usually pull in a tarot reading, or does it just depend?
So it depends. I'm trying to think with the crossing, I think there's what, like, oh, I can't remember how many. I'm trying to think of the spread. I want to say there's like 12 cards there. Typically, the one that I like the most is I like to do a card that represents the person and then their environment. And then I do a 9 card spread in the middle. So
Okay.
that's kind of my go-to. I feel like that's my comfort. Unless I'm doing like a quick read and we just pull 3, which is like past, present, future energy. But I definitely like the 9 card. That works really well for me.
Yeah, interesting. I'll have to try that. Recently for myself, I've been pulling 3 cards and do like a mind, body, spirit. I don't know. I
Oh, I
really
love
just
that.
I made that up. but but yeah,
I love
it's felt really supportive for me.
It's so fun. I am addicted to watching card readers on YouTube to just see what different spreads they come up with. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's this one that I follow, and she puts so much pride in coming up with different spreads for her viewers. And I just think that's great because, again, there is the structure to tarot, but I also think there is a fluidity that comes with the intuition, like we talked about. And so I think it's really fun for you to find a spread that works for you. I love your whole mind, body, and spirit. I want to try that. I think that could be really fun.
Yeah, yeah, it has been fun. But so what do you do? And maybe this happens less as you get more familiar with the cards, but sometimes I'll pick a card for myself and I won't quite know what it's trying to tell me. So have you had that experience? And what do you do when you don't know what the card is trying to tell
Oh,
you?
yeah, for sure. I think that happens to everyone. I think there's several different ways. You can sit and really try to analyze the card and look at the different details within the card. So the symbology, again, the way that the characters are depicted on the card, and try to see if you can get a message that way. You can also, ask for a clear message from the divine and get it that way. You can also pull clarifying cards. There are
Mm.
times when you said that you pulled a card and you're like, I don't want this card. I've done that before too. And I'm like, I'm gonna pull like 3 more cards that support this card because I want to see what else is here. And I just
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like, yes, that can be good. Sometimes that, can also confuse you too.
Yeah, no, I found myself doing that as well. And sometimes it does feel clarifying, like you said, and sometimes it does just feel like I'm grasping for straws and getting seeking more than I'm accepting. And so I've kind of sometimes I just have to shut myself down, and be like, Rachel, just
Yeah.
let it go for now.
Yeah, and I think that's smart because there could be a vast array of reasons why you're not getting the message. Maybe you are off that day, your energy is off. Maybe you're not supposed to be receiving that message, for another 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, who knows?
Mm.
But somehow, there's so much divine guidance that plays in. Like, I just felt like, what if there was some energy that came and flipped this card over because they're really excited about you, like getting this information, but then there's this other energy that's like, no, the timing is not right yet. And so I think it's just, again, it's important to really just trust what your inner knowing is saying. And when it's time to just be like, okay, I'm walking away for now, then you walk away and you try again at a later date and time.
Yeah, yeah. And then what about reverse cards? Because I've heard some readers say that they do work with reverse cards, some say they don't. So what's your strategy around that?
Again, it depends on the day. When I first started reading tarot, I was like, I will not do reverse because I just need to get upright messaging kind of under my belt at first.
That's what I've
And
been
so,
doing.
yeah, a lot often I've heard different things. I've heard that you can take a card and if it's in reverse, it's basically the opposite message. But then I've also heard, well, be careful because that's not always the case.
Hmm.
So again, I think it's kind of the same message that we've been saying. Listen to your intuition and what it's really saying to you. And if you're unsure about it, then maybe look in the, reference it so that you get more information about it. That's another thing that I've been doing a lot lately. I love watching YouTube videos of just the cards and they just different people going through and explaining the cards. Because to your point, they do differ slightly. And so I feel like I'm to a point with my reading that I want to be able to get as much information from a card as I can. And so if I can learn from other readers, learn from different books, then I feel like I'm kind of absorbing that intellectual information. So I have that in the back of my mind, but really relying on my intuition.
Yeah. You're really activating this drive in me to start doing more and more research on the meanings of the cards. So I'm excited to delve into that.
Yeah, and I love that.
So when you say you've talked about energy speaking to you and the divine speaking to you, and I know that you work with spirit guides. What does that look like or feel like to you, that connection to the divine or these energies that you're referring to?
So for me personally, I think it started out when I started doing yoga and I could just feel like there was some sort of energy there. I would get connected and just we'd be in a meditation after a session and I just felt like a wave of something coming over me. And I liked the feeling of it. I wasn't sure what it was, but I was like, okay, I am down for yoga. This is what I'm doing. Like I want to get that rush of that feeling every time. And of course it wouldn't come with every yoga session that I did, but when I would experience that, I was very grateful for it. And so then I started just kind of on my journey doing, my husband was kind of spearheaded this for me. He was doing meditation. And at the time, this was years ago, I was so type A, the Virgo in me was like, there is no way I'm going to be able to shut my mind off to meditate. There's just no way. And he was like, okay, that's fine. Like, you don't have to do it. And he started getting into breath work. And I saw him kind of, I call it zenning out. He
Mm.
would just be so calm. And I was like, I want to experience that. So I started doing breath work sessions with him and slowly started meditating. And again, I would feel that kind of wave of calmness, that wave of energy come over me. And it just felt so good that I wanted to explore that more. So then I started meditating even more and just kind of, I never really had like a mentor up until that point. Like I had no one that I was really talking to about it, other than my husband. We would talk about what we would experience, between the two of us. Um, but it wasn't until I'm trying to think of like when I finally started to understand it. I did a lot of meditations by Jeffrey Allen, and he explained a lot about going into your headspace and your third eye, and that really resonated with me. And then it just kept kind of opening me up to this feeling that I was getting, again, that wave of energy. And since I've been able to explore that, it presents itself as inner knowings, all those kind of things. We could go into this whole lesson about all the clairvoyance, clairaudience, all that stuff, but that is how it was like presenting itself to me.
Very, very cool. And along those lines, how do you work on that connection with your intuition? How do you strengthen it? And if you want to go into any of the clairs that you work with, feel free to go there too.
Sure. So I meditate most mornings before I get out of bed. I actually sit up in bed and I do like these neck stretches. It's really calming because I don't want to get out of bed. I've been listening to so many podcasts, like all these techniques to like have a really good morning routine, but getting out of bed is just not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have children, so I need to get out of bed. But what's been working really well for me is just sitting up And then I, kind of start getting comfortable. And then I meditate, I do chakra clearings, I do grounding meditations, all of which have been self-taught, which I think is interesting too. I've often had friends say, well, how have you learned all of this? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just been this journey where I've wanted to explore these feelings that I've had, and they've kind of led me down this path. And so one of the things that I do is I meditate. I did recently meet with a coach. I've never met with like a holistic intuitive coach before, but my friend recommended it, and I was like, oh, I'm down for anything. Let's keep this journey going. And she was saying one of the things that she does that's been really helpful for her is that she actually closes off her intuition at times throughout the day. And then she opens it when she needs it, so that it makes it so that there's a clear channel. There's like a time period where the divine knows, okay, now she's really paying attention. We can give these messages to her, and it's going to be in a clear manner that she's going to understand. I haven't quite mastered that yet, but I am working on that.
Yeah, I've heard other people discuss that as well. And it makes sense that you have to kind of find your own way and try your own things because you have a 3 in your profile in human design. And the 3 is all about experimenting and really you learn by getting your hands dirty and doing it your way. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
That makes so much sense. I love that you're sharing about my human design, because I'm like, okay, yes, tell me more. I've had one human design reading, and well, actually, I've had 2 now, and I find them so fascinating. But y'all start talking about stuff, I'm like, I don't know what that means. It's like it can be so in depth, these
Yeah.
readings. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. Human design is very, very in depth. Um, what is something that you used to feel shame about that you've learned to love or accept about yourself?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I could say tarot. There was a time where I was like, I'm just keeping it in my inner circle and I don't want to share this gift. But as I've opened up and shared it more, it's become even more sacred to me, which is
Mm.
interesting. Because we talked about how, when I published it on the website, it didn't feel good. But then, the talking with you and more people that I'm talking with in different groups and whatnot, it does feel good to share it. I feel like it's accepting a part of myself that's a true part, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there can be truth in when we share something that's so sacred to us, it can lose some of the magic. But I think as long as our intention is in the right place and our heart is in the right place with why we're sharing it, then it becomes even more sacred, like you said, because we're meant to be sharing it. And it's coming from that heart place for us. What is something that you feel like you struggle to listen to your intuition around or areas where you're still learning to build that connection with your intuition?
So that's funny. I'm going through that right now. That's why I say it's funny. It's interesting. So I had a small business. It was all about hosting and inspiring people to gather, with their friends and loved ones. It did not survive the pandemic. So I had to shut it down. And ever since, I have felt this need to like start something else up. And it was funny. I was talking to another girlfriend of mine, and I was like, I feel like I have all of these paths. I have got probably 5 different businesses that I feel like I could start, that I could share with the world. And I am terrified to do it because what if it fails again? I have another business, that's I've been running for over a decade, and it's a very successful business. So it's interesting to me that I've had one fail and one success, but the fear is more overpowering than the success, right? As human beings, we're
Always.
so complex. It's so interesting. But as I've been on this journey of trying to figure out, okay, what's my next project? I feel like it's been really hard for me to connect intuitively. And it was funny, my girlfriend, she was doing my human design actually. And all of a sudden she was like, hold on a second. She's like, I feel like I'm getting this message for you. You need to tap into your intuition. You keep looking for all of these external ways to get this information. Like you keep pulling tarot. Tarot's not giving you the answer you need. It's because you have it within you. You need to just sit in it and wait for the answer to come. So there's this process that we can go through with meditation and prayer, where when you pray, you're asking a question, and when you meditate is when you get the answer.
Mm.
And so I've been kind of thinking about that a lot, which is funny. This was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't sat down and done it. That process of praying and meditating, because I think I'm still scared. There's this fear that I'm going to fail, and so I'm not ready to take that step forward. And so it's interesting because I feel like intuitively I'm getting tons of other messages about other things. But so then I sit back and I'm like, okay, if I'm not getting any sort of message, is there divine timing at play? And I do believe that there's also that when the timing is right, I will sit down and meditate and get the answer and be able to move forward in a way that feels really good because I have the energetic foundation behind it.
Yeah, I think this is so relatable in a dance that a lot of us do, even if it's unconscious. This fear shutting down our intuition and kind of blocking us from taking those next steps. And I mean, I love what you shared about the prayer being the question and the meditation being the answer, because that holds true in my life. And I find avoiding, when I'm seeking external answers and avoiding my own internal guidance, there's definitely fear there. And sometimes just setting the intention of, I want to move away from this fear, or I want to be able to take the next step on this journey, or clear the blocks, or, just even stating something along those lines of like, I'm ready for this to evolve, helps the process start, even if I am still too afraid to move forward or listen to the answers.
Yeah, 100%, because you've put that statement out there, you've put out that intention, and the energy is going to circulate around that for sure.
Yeah, it's a constant dance. There's always the fear stops us even more than I think we realize, and can be very tricky and
Yes,
sneaky.
sneaky for sure.
Yeah. What is something you wish people talked about more, or that you wish you were able to talk about more openly?
Self-love. I
Mm.
think if we could talk more about self-love and self-acceptance, people would be happier. You talked about being able to like turn off the external. That's one of my favorite things to talk with people about, is how do you turn off the external and go inward and start accepting you for every part of you, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. How do you start accepting it so that you can form a strong self-love, right?
I mean, this is everything to me. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about too, because I think if we can accept ourselves, I think it starts with understanding ourselves. If we just have the courage to go inwards and understand who we are and accept all of who we are, then we can embrace who we're here to be, and we can stop, turning to others for the answers or trying to be someone we're not. And I think our world would be a completely different place if we were just able to do that for ourselves. Again, I think fear can get in the way of that. How do you do that for yourself?
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about this. It's never ending. It's something that you have to do your whole life, is constantly have this, I mean, relationship with yourself, essentially, right? Being curious about who you truly are, being curious about the depths of your soul, and really accepting the fact that you have a dark side to you, that there are things that maybe aren't the best, but they're there, they're serving some sort of purpose, and being curious about what that purpose is.
Yeah, curiosity. I think that that's a huge part of it. And knowing that there's going to be parts of yourself that you might feel shame around or guilt around, and being okay with that, with the darker sides of you, and not being
Mhm.
so afraid of them, because one, we all have them, and two, I believe that the more we talk about them, even if it's just with one person who we feel really safe with, it shines a light on them, and we can realize that it's not so dark, or it's not so scary, or it's not so shameful, or that it can be transformed and transmuted. And so I think opening up about things that we feel so ashamed around takes their power away.
I 100% agree. And I think that that's such a beautiful process. When you're able to see yourself in that way, you're not affected by the external as much. I'm not saying that it goes away because it's always going to be that dance, as you put it. There's that dance between the external and the internal, and not being influenced or um, changed by the external, right? And so I think the more that we explore ourselves, the deeper that connection becomes. And so the external doesn't affect us the way that it would before. But it's a
Yeah.
scary process. So many people deny it because they're like, oh my God, that sounds awful. It's just the same reason why people avoid therapy, right? It's them going inward. It's them having to really identify and accept these things, these blocks, these behaviors, belief systems, everything. But I think when we're able to, like you said, shine light on it, then you're able to either accept it and let it kind of lie and it's not as big of a deal, or you transmute it to something so incredibly beautiful.
Yeah. It's
Kind of
just like
reminds me of a butterfly, which I didn't talk about that. Why is the butterfly your symbol?
well, a couple reasons. One, every time I first move somewhere, and I've moved to a lot of different places, the minute I get to the new place I'm moving to, I always see a butterfly. And two, I just one day asked the universe, what should my sign be? And I got the message of purple butterfly. And then I said, okay, please send me a purple butterfly to see. And there's not many purple butterflies around in the world. But the next day I got a package, and in it I got a free keychain with purple butterflies on it. So
I
ever since
love it.
then I've just held on to that. Um, Butterflies in general, but specifically purple butterflies. And I just take that as my sign of you're on the right track and things are going to be
Yeah,
okay.
I
Yeah.
love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And what we were just talking about in regards to the transmuting and the transformation, the fear around embracing those darker sides reminds me of what we were talking about with tarot and the harder cards, like the tower card, being afraid of getting those cards or being in a tower moment, but how we need that tower moment for our to rise from the ashes, like with the phoenix. So I think the more the more you can go with your darker sides, the more light you can shine in the world.
I totally agree. I love that.
Do you find that people come to you for specific reasons with tarot, like wanting to work through these harder topics, or does it really vary?
It varies. I had one girl, she came, all she wanted to talk about was her marriage. And we probably did 6 months of stuff together. And every single time she's like, I want to know about my marriage. My marriage. Should I leave? Should I not? And I'm just like, girl, oh, you're getting the same message because you're not acting on this. I can give you a reading, but I guarantee it's going to be the exact same thing as the month before, because you're taking this as like a fortune teller type reading, and that's not what I do. It's like I can give you this information, and if you take this specific action, it could potentially lead to this outcome. But to me, there's still human choice in the matter. It's not like, you get these cards and it's this definite outcome for you. It just doesn't work that way. And so I think oftentimes people forget that they play a part in the reading as well. You can take this information and do nothing with it, which is completely fine. You can take this information and really internalize it and say, okay, I want to go down this path, or no, I want to go down this path, and make that choice. And then you can potentially get to the outcome of whatever the reading was. But there's still that human element in it and that choice for sure.
Absolutely. And it's another way of just wanting the external to give you the answers when really the internal has to play the part. Like you have to take your intuition into account when you're getting the messages and take the action that you're being called to take. And you can't just be seeking for someone else to tell you what the answer is.
100%. I've had that conversation with my clients often.
Yeah. What is something that tarot has taught you about yourself, about life, about anything?
That's a great question. I think, again, just going inward, that we have the answers within, and I choose to use tarot to help me put the picture together in a way that makes sense. Some people, they journal a bunch and they can put everything on paper and then they can see how it makes sense. For me, I love seeing the cards and seeing spread. That's why I love different types of cards too, with tarot and oracle, because I love seeing the different artwork, and it's like this puzzle piece and all these pieces that you put together, and then you see this perfect picture that's like, oh my God, okay, yes, that makes sense to me. I feel drawn to do that now. This feels good, so I'm gonna follow this instead of having it be all up in my head and it's making no sense.
Yeah. Oh, that I feel that very much. It helps you make sense of life in a new way and see things in a new way. And it's very true that every deck has a different energy. And I used to have people tell me, you can't start using tarot until someone gifts you a deck. And that stopped me for a while. And then one day I was like, I was very pulled to this deck for very specific reasons, but I don't think that's true. But how do you choose your decks?
I think they choose me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like you. I waited a long time for tarot because I heard the same thing. I'm like, come on, someone gift me a deck. Like, where is this person? Like, gift me a deck because I really want to get going. And then finally I was like, no, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna get one and it's gonna be no problem and I'm just gonna start with it. I feel like depending on where I'm at, like I can go into a store and right away I'm drawn right to a deck and I pick it up and I know for certain this is the deck. There have been decks that I've picked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, no. And I drop
Mm-hmm.
them and I leave them. So I think it's just, again, it's like if you are intuitive and you can feel that energy, you're going to know right away if a deck is right for you or if it's not. And I also think too, I've got tons of decks. There are some that I'm like, I have not pulled them out in years because that energy is not there for me. And not to say that I ever will again, but it's just not there, you know?
Absolutely. Again, it comes back to trusting yourself and really trusting to where your energy is pulled and just not questioning it, just, listening to that.
Yes, definitely.
Living intuitively wild means living dedicated to your true, authentic self, no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
Oh my goodness. Oh, this is such a good question. It's taken me a long time to really live within myself. So, I grew up, I was brought up in a religious household. So
Mm.
for me, as soon as I, was old enough to really kind of see things for what they were, I went through this whole period where I just wanted nothing. I just wanted to be myself. I didn't believe in anything higher, and then luckily that kind of came back into my life. And I feel like now being able to rely on myself for the answers is something I wouldn't trade for the world. I feel a little emotional saying that because there's nothing like being able to make a decision and stand by it with every fiber of your being because you know in your entire body that it was the right choice for you to make. And I feel like as I've gotten older, that happens more frequently in my life. And there's just something so beautiful about that because that breeds so much confidence, so much self-awareness, so much self-love, like what we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me emotional too because I don't know what I would do without that connection to my intuition and without that foundation I've built of self confidence to know that I can stand on this belief. Like, I know that this is true for me. And it doesn't matter what anyone else says, it doesn't matter what's true for anyone else. I know it's true for me, and I can use that to guide my life. I mean, that has saved me time and time again. And I think that, I mean, again, coming back to you need to walk through the darker moments. You need to understand yourself. You need to go there with yourself to be able to really get there with yourself.
Definitely.
Well, Katie, thank you so much. This was such a gift. And I'm so excited to share your gifts with everyone. Do you have any last messages or thoughts or anything that you feel like you want to share with the audience before we go?
Let's see. I think to all the listeners out there, if you are feeling drawn to being able to find a contentment in life, search within. Find ways that feel good for you to go inward and really discover who you are, the beautiful gifts that you have, because we all have them, as you mentioned. And I think just realizing that that is something that you deserve, that you're worthy of, and that you can give yourself. There's not a lot of things that we can give to ourselves, but being able to go within and have this understanding that I'm enough just as I am, and that I like myself just as I am. There's nothing more beautiful than that. So I encourage the listeners to explore that.
Yeah, thank you. If there's any takeaway, I think that that's it. And to just trust yourself on that journey. Please share where everyone can connect with you, reach out to you, any work you're doing, anything you want to share.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, just katie.mcminn. You can find me there. And then if you learn more about tarot or get a hold of me that way, I also have katiemcminn.com, and then it's /card reading, so they can find all of that there. Thank you
Perfect.
so much for having me on this phone. This was a great discussion. I loved chatting with you today for sure.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.